gathering. 6 giant American B52 bombers flew into Britain, ready to take a leading role in any attack.
Diplomacy backed by massive force. In the skies over Gloucestershire, 6 American B-52 bombers, arriving from Louisiana at RAF Fairford, staging post on their way to Serbia if they're ordered to go.
I think the B-52s will be a very big player in anything that we undertake, that NATO decides to do. I think just by the virtue of being here, we send a very powerful signal that NATO means business.
The B-52s, veterans of the Vietnam War, carry 8 cruise missiles each. Their deployment by Washington and London was timed for maximum picture power, with the message President Milosevic must bow to international demands.
I think the pictures of the B-52 bombers will be a very visible piece of evidence to him today that we mean business and we have determination.
But the man negotiating directly with President Milosevic says there's no sign he's backing down.
I'm not going to characterize our situation any differently than I have in the past. Nothing has changed, and the situation is very serious. Thank you.
And that still seems to be the position after yet another round of talks today. The Serbs are continuing to mobilize as recruits take the oath, swearing to defend every inch of Serbia's territory, including Kosovo. Facing them, the 16 nations of NATO meet tomorrow, when final authorization for strikes looks highly likely, if Italy and Germany, both with new governments, decide to come on board.
Well, the NATO Council will be meeting tomorrow. We expect at the present time that that council will take the decision to order the military to be ready for strikes. We will be having an emergency cabinet meeting in London on Monday. Mr. Blair's returned this weekend. I will want to report to him, and we will want to consider how Britain can continue to take the lead on this issue.
So, after weeks of division between Western governments, their agreement to back the massive armada assembled against Serbia seems very close. The credibility of all NATO governments is about to be put to the test. They will need very substantial concessions from Serbia to pull back their forces now. James Robbins, BBC News.
In Kosovo itself, thousands of refugees are still hiding in the hills as the West continues to negotiate guarantees for their safety. Britain again warned today of an imminent humanitarian disaster. Ben Brown has spent the day with the refugees, people of Albanian descent who make up the majority of the population of the province and want more control over their own affairs.
In the rolling hills of Kosovo, some of those who've been fleeing from the Serbs are now dying as well. This tent contains the body of a woman called Rahime Brahimi. She was only 30 years old. Her husband, Liman, is left to mourn her and to care for their 4 children. The eldest, who's 11, is inconsolable tonight. Kosovo's agony, it seems, knows no end. Liman told me the family have been on the run since March. His wife had become increasingly weak, hungry and exhausted. Until today, finally, she slipped away.
We have faith in NATO and the West, that they will act. If things stay like this, the Serbs will massacre us. The only hope we have is from the outside world.
Very soon now, perhaps within 2 or 3 weeks, the weather here will change dramatically. It will be snowing and freezing, and more refugees will start to die, just like Rahima. It is why the United Nations are demanding that President Milosevic lets these people go back to their homes before it is too late. Close by, we came across the rebel soldiers of the Kosovo Liberation Army, which has been defeated by the Serbs, though not destroyed. The KLA made a point today of laying down their weapons. They've declared a temporary truce in their campaign for independence. They don't want to be accused of provoking further conflict, as NATO weighs up whether it too should wage war on the Serbs.
If NATO will do that, I think that's a good movement for the more and exactly for the civilians, because they are in very dangerous situation for food, for example, and from the enemy. That's why I think that will be good.
Tonight, the rebel soldiers are not shooting, but singing songs of freedom. Whatever the West decides to do in the coming days, these men insist they will never give up their struggle for independence. Ben Brown, BBC News, Kosovo.
Well, James Robbins is in Downing Street, where there'll be an emergency cabinet meeting tomorrow. And in Belgrade, the BBC's John Devitt, who's been following the last-ditch efforts to reach an agreement. James, first, what will Milosevic have to do, and how soon will he have to do it to stop these airstrikes?
It's very clear that he'll have to do a great deal very quickly if he's to avert airstrikes, particularly now that it appears finally a consensus is emerging in NATO in favour of strikes if diplomacy fails. Crucially, the credibility of President Milosevic is now at an all-time low. It's never been high, of course, and the international community is demanding not only that he takes his forces out of Kosovo and that he allows negotiations, genuine negotiations, to start to give Kosovo some degree of self-rule, but also that he allows in a substantial force of international troops to verify that he's complied and to monitor the situation on the ground, to be sure that refugees are allowed safely back to their homes, and to be utterly convinced that a genuine process of political dialogue is going on.
John Devitt, any signs tonight in Belgrade that Milosevic is prepared to back down to that extent?
Well, there's no official timetable, of course, to this. Mr. Holbrooke did indicate that perhaps it would be over in about 24 hours. His whole demeanour and his whole analysis has been very downbeat, but that's actually quite typical of Richard Holbrooke. The important thing, I think, is that they are talking, and they're talking a lot. They've been going on for some 12 hours, and they've just broken for something to eat. And I think that that means they're getting down to some detail. The stumbling block seems to be what James was talking about there, the process of verification still.
And how are ordinary Serbs facing up to the prospect of being attacked by NATO?
Well, every day that passes, of course, people get more and more nervous. Today in the northern town of Niš, an anti-aircraft battery decided to have a practice without telling anybody, and this certainly alarmed the population. Another sign of the tension here is that Western diplomats expect to be out of here by tomorrow if the activation order is given by NATO, so that the Western embassies would be closed down. So, yes, people are nervous.
John Devitt, James Robbins, thanks very much. Here, the Chancellor, Gordon Brown, has insisted that